All right, well, welcome to the 91st Sunday Assembly in San Diego and the 22nd online assembly. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you are here today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We won't be showing the lyrics on the screen, but please sing. The program with lyrics is on the Meetup or Facebook event you signed up on, and we'll put that link in the chat window right now. It's right there if you want to take a look at it. Because of the lag time, we'll keep everyone muted except for the person speaking. So we can't hear you, but we see you. So feel free to wave your hands or clap or smile. That's always wonderful. Because this is an online assembly, you might see people from other assemblies, even overseas. So if you're from another assembly, please feel free to edit your name and say where you're from. For instance, we have somebody talking to us from Virginia today. That's pretty amazing. All the way across the country. Hello to you, Virginia. Not her name. So Sunday Assembly is a non-religious inclusive community that meets monthly to hear great speakers, sing songs, share stories. In between our monthly assemblies, we get together for social activities and do service projects. We aim to build bridges and to help everyone too, as our motto says, live better, help often, and wonder more. Every Sunday Assembly has a theme, and the theme for this Sunday Assembly is exposed. And our speaker today is exceptional. We're really, really excited about the speech we have today. The media-free zone is you not exposing your face by disabling your video, and childcare is still, yes, you. For those of you that just want to ask really quickly, for those of you this is your first time to Sunday Assembly, if you wouldn't mind to just wave your hand or somehow signify. Let's see who that is. Hello, Paul, first time here. Wow, that's fantastic. Welcome to Sunday Assembly. The thing that we do the most, we get together, is to celebrate this one life that we know that we have. And that's the same for everybody. So we try to make the most of this one life. We're going to start off today just to get our pulse going and our blood rushing and our fun in place with Mr. Paul Svensson, who is going to sing We Are Going to Be Friends by the White Stripes. I turn it over to you, Mr. Paul Svensson.
Morning, everybody. I hope you have your lyrics. So this is a very simple song. If you listen to that's the tune. That's it. 3 notes. Let's give it a shot. I'll sing a verse and you'll figure it out if you don't know it already. Fall is here, hear the yell, back to school, ring the bell, brand new shoes, walking blues, climb the fence, books and pens. I can tell that we're gonna be friends. I can tell that we are gonna be friends. Got it? Nod yes. I see lips moving. Here we go. Walk with me, Susie Lee, through the park and by the tree. We will rest upon the ground, look at all the bugs we found, safely walk to school without a sound. Safely walk to school without a sound. Here we are, no one else. We walk to school all by ourselves. There's dirt on our uniforms from chasing all the ants and worms. We clean up and now it's time to learn. We clean up and now it's time to learn. Numbers, letters, learn to spell, rhymes and books and show and tell. Playtime and throw the ball, back to class, through the hall. Teacher marks our against the wall. Teacher marks our height against the wall. Here's a little different here. We don't notice any time passed. We don't notice anything. We sit side by side in every class. Teacher thinks that I sound funny, but she likes the way you sing. Tonight I'll dream while I'm in bed. Silly thoughts go through my head about the bugs and alphabet. When I wake tomorrow, I bet that you and I walk together again. I can tell that we were gonna be friends. One more time. Yes, I can tell that we're gonna be friends. Good job, you sounded great.
I love that song. It's just so simple and just reminds me of what it's like to be a kid and the wonder of that. We do a little thing at Sunday Assembly we call Life Happens, and it's just you letting us share with the rest of the group things that are going on in your life. If you do have a Life Happens while I'm talking, please go ahead and post this in here. I'm going to read some of the ones that have come in already. You post that right in the chat. Life Happens. Lelia no longer needs to wear her back brace. She has freedom. Boy, that has been such a long trip. Oh my goodness. So happy for you. We have a Life Happens from Edward's mom, Sigrid, is with us here in San Diego for 6 weeks. Also, our niece, Martina, is visiting for a week, and we have friends in town from Seattle. It's a visiting week at our household, and we're all having lots of fun. That's from Edward and Kristen. Welcome to everybody, and welcome if you're here for Sunday Assembly today, because we'd love to have you here. And we want to welcome Shannon and Beatrice Golomb. That's their first times here. Life Happens for our kid Syria received acceptance from 8 California public universities. Wow. She'll go to visit some, and we'll report back next month on decisions. 8. Wow, that is, and she only applied for 8. That's amazing. No, I don't know, actually. So if anybody has Life Happens, I can add those in later, but it is always really great to be able to know what's happening in other people's lives. And really, that's the joy of life, isn't it? Sharing it. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Jen McCown, who is going to tell us what we're doing in the community. Jen, Help Happens.
Good morning, everyone. So I Love a Clean San Diego's 20th annual Creek to Bay cleanup is happening on Saturday, April 23rd from 9 a.m. to noon. Sunday Assembly San Diego will be hosting the cleanup site at Choyas Creek. In the past 19 years, this event has resulted in more than 3 million pounds of litter being removed from the local environment and prevented from entering our waterways and the ocean. If you're interested in participating, the sign up for the event will open up on April 1st. At the I Love a Clean San Diego website. And we're gonna need some volunteers to help with hosting our site and to participate in the cleanup at Choyas Creek. So if you're interested in volunteering, please put a note in the chat or send me a message. Thanks, and I hope we'll see a lot of you out there.
Fantastic, please do come. There was a cleanup yesterday. We cleaned up at our beach, and they're just always so much fun and just a great time to get together and just wonderful to give back to the community. So please, let's do that in community. We have a reading today. Our reader is Leah Kogan, and she's reading Notes from the First Few Days of 2020 by Mari Andrew. Leah?
Notes from the First Few Days of 2020. I'm washing my face before bed while the country is on fire. It feels dumb to wash my face and dumb not to. It has never been this way, and it has always been this way. Someone has always clinked a cocktail glass in one hemisphere as someone loses a home in another, while someone falls in love in the same apartment building where someone grieves. The fact that suffering, mundanity, and beauty coincide is unbearable and remarkable. I consider whether it's foolish to want to have children at such times as these, and I consider that it's always been times such as these, and I consider that it's never been worse, and in some ways never been better. Shouldn't my hypothetical future child have their chance to smell honeysuckle and taste berries? These thoughts roll around my head like marbles that were tossed on a smooth surface. How is a person supposed to do ordinary things like face wash or big things like fall in love when a quick phone scroll is both advertising discounted designer socks and informing me that 12 million acres have been burned? 12 million. I despair with an exhale. Then I refuse to despair with an inhale. Despair is a tool to control us. I scroll some more, a new baby, a new album, a flower, firefighters, a threatened world holds so much. I must choose between despair and energy. I choose the latter, Keats. What does it look like to state in the midst of smoke, I choose energy? For starters, I choose to finish washing my face. Then I choose to look, not away, but toward. I choose to trust, first in goodness, then in people I know, then in people I'll never meet, always in myself. I choose to eat less meat and dairy, even though, yes, there are zillions of other ways to help the planet, but that should never stop me from doing one thing. And I care about cows and koalas and my cat and the pigeons she watches. I choose to do the things that I may think are too insignificant to matter, because sometimes protesting is an act of grieving and small choices toward energy keep me from despair. I choose to enjoy. I choose a new record. I choose to keep a $5 note in my pocket for someone who may need it. I choose to text a friend, I'm sending lots of love. And I choose to buy from Aboriginal-owned businesses, and I choose to show up at a birthday party because grief and celebration often happen in the same night.
Thank you, Leah. That's really wonderful. Well, as advertised, our speaker today, Beatrice Golomb, MD, PhD, is a professor of medicine at the UCSD School of Medicine. She has a background in physics, engineering at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, biology, which her PhD is in, medicine. She's an MD and was chief medical resident. And research methods, she was a RAND, UCLA, Robert Woods Johnson clinical scholar. Her laboratory focuses on exposure and conditions tied to oxidation, antioxidation, and cell energetics. Dr. Golomb was the first to seriously document evidence of her theoried source for the cause of the mysterious illness in US Diplomats in Cuba and China, and the first to publish a peer-reviewed article on this. She has presented this work to the Cuban National Academy of Sciences and the US Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, whose report, December 2020, agreed with her conclusion. We are pleased as punch to have her speak for us today, and we hear that she lives for Q&A, so she will gleefully stay after to answer your questions. Please welcome Dr. Golomb.
As advertised, I will be speaking today on Diplomats, Mystery Illness, and Pulse Radiofrequency Microwave Radiation. This has also been termed Havana Syndrome. Next slide. So in latter 2017, we began hearing news reports that U.S. diplomats and their family members in Havana, Cuba, had been experiencing strange episodes in which unusual sounds were heard, often accompanied by ear pain and followed by development of myriad symptoms, such as headache, cognitive problems, sleep problems, tinnitus or ringing ears, dizziness, irritability, and anxiety. These were characterized in the media as sonic attacks, presumably because of the concurrence of sounds being heard and auditory-related symptoms like ear pain, tinnitus, and for some people, hearing loss. Next slide. So what is the basis of the case for radiofrequency radiation? And it rests on several pillars: specific characters of the sounds heard, the clinical features, the symptoms and signs reported by individuals, precedent for past exposure of U.S. diplomats to microwave radiation in a foreign embassy setting, actual measurement of high levels of radiofrequency radiation, known mechanisms by which this radiation can cause the symptoms and noises that were produced, and comparison to other proper hypotheses, none of which do a near equivalent job of explaining the evidence. Next slide. So sound versus radiation, what is the difference? I've noticed that a lot of people confuse these, and this is understandable since both travel in waves and both are measured in cycles per second or hertz. Both are used in medical imaging. We have things like X-rays and CT scans, which are radiation, and ultrasound, which is sound waves. But in fact, these are very different kinds of waves. Sound waves are pressure waves, so the direction of variation is in the direction of travel, whereas electromagnetic radiation are what are called transverse waves. The direction of variation is perpendicular to the direction of travel. So all electromagnetic radiation, as mentioned, is characterized by its frequency in cycles per second, and the arrow shows the many kinds of radiation that are sort of chopped somewhat arbitrarily into bins that are given names. Some of these you will be familiar with, like visible light. At the very low end, we have extremely low frequency radiation, which is like the 60 hertz power line radiation that you have going through your home. And then as we get to higher frequencies, we got radio frequency radiation, then infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma ray. So radio frequency radiation is a quite broad swath of frequencies from 3,000 to 300 billion cycles a second. And microwaves are the upper part of the radio frequency range from 300 million to 300 billion cycles per second. So all microwaves are radio waves, but not the converse. Another big difference between electromagnetic radiation and sound is that all electromagnetic radiation, regardless of the frequency, travels at the same speed, the speed of light, and of course sound travels at the speed of sound, so this is the difference between the speed of lightning and the speed of thunder. But even though sound and radiation are different things, there are selective settings in which radiation can produce the perception of sound. This is a phenomenon that's sometimes called the Frey effect or microwave auditory effect or radio frequency hearing. This occurs only in a restricted set of frequencies from 2.4 million to 10 billion cycles per second. And it only occurs for radiation that's pulsed. That is to say, it stops and starts, stops and starts, stops and starts, often, by the way, millions of times a second. The main theory about how radiation with these properties produces sound or perception of sound is the so-called thermoelastic theory. Just like your microwave oven heats things up, so this radio frequency or microwave radiation leads to minuscule rises in temperature in the head on the order of a millionth of a degree, and this sets up pressure waves that are then sensed by the cochlea or the ear, and thereafter processed by the brain just as though they were normal sounds. So they sound for all purposes like regular sounds. Well, the good news is that quote sound or noises that are produced by radiation have some different characteristics than noises that are produced by sound waves. Next slide. And we can compare the characteristics reported by diplomats for the sounds heard as in terms of how they are a fit to radio frequency versus sound waves. So first off, different diplomats reported different sounds. And if there were a common sound source, the sound would sound similar to everyone as long as they didn't have hearing loss. But for radio frequency radiation-induced noises, the same stimulus produces a different perception because the character of the sound heard depends on pulse characteristics but also on head dimensions, which differ for different people. The specific character of the noises that were reported encompassed chirping and clanging and clicking and grinding and hissing. There is no reason why it would be these sounds if it were sound waves, but these are exactly the spectrum of sounds that are known to be produced by this Frey effect, this radio frequency-induced noise. The third feature is that it was reported that these sounds, quote unquote, were perceived essentially exclusively at night. Now, actual sound sources can be heard day or night with or without ambient noise, but this Frey effect can only be heard in settings of very low ambient noise, such as in the deep of night. A fourth characteristic is that media reported that these sounds had so-called laser-like localization in space, which was said to, quote, defy known physics. So with the Frey effect, if you step outside the path of radiation, the sound goes away. You step back in the path, the sound comes back. Of course, laser-like localization does not defy the physics of electromagnetic radiation. Radio frequency radiation is electromagnetic radiation and can have this laser-like specificity. Analogously, if one person is in the path of radiation and someone else is outside the path, then two people who are quite close to each other, one can hear the sound and the other may not. And this was also reported with the diplomats, where one individual would hear a loud noise and someone in, quote, the immediate vicinity, unquote, would hear nothing. The fifth characteristic that we can compare is that sounds were reported to follow people as they move. Now, if you walk in the path of radiation, this Frey effect, this radio frequency-induced sound, persists. And since it's produced inside the head, it's often perceived, by the way, as coming from just behind the head, or for some people just above or inside the head. But whichever that location is for that individual, it's independent of where they are relative to the origin of the radio frequency. So it seems to follow people where they move. Sound waves do not seem to follow people when they move. In fact, we have something in the brain called the superior olivary nuclei that help us to localize the place where sound is coming from. And finally, a number of diplomats reported that they had attempted to cover their ears or head, and this had led to no diminution in the apparent intensity of the sound. Now, if these were actual sound waves, pressure waves, this would lead to reduced intensity, but it does not for radio frequency-induced sound. And in fact, if there's any ambient noise to be further reduced, it can even lead to intensification of the sound. So each of these features that were reported in the media because they were distinctive and unexpected are a fit, indeed an expectation, a prediction of radio frequency radiation. None is expected or predicted with sound waves, and several of these features are frankly incompatible with sound. In fact, there isn't any other thing that is known to produce noises with these features except for pulsed radio frequency/microwave radiation. And I say radio frequency/microwave, this occurs within a part of the radio frequency range that includes a part of the microwave range. Next slide. So the next sort of pillar of the argument relates to the symptoms that were reported by the diplomats and how they compare to symptoms that are known to arise in people who get toxicity from radiation. And just like with every other potentially toxic exposure, whether it be peanuts or penicillin or fat and cholesterol-lowering drugs, there are some individuals who will experience toxicity at much lower exposure levels than others, that will have problems with exposures that others have no problems with. And there is a literature about these people, and we can compare the fraction reporting each of a set of symptoms among those with sensitivity to non-ionizing radiation, radiofrequency radiation, to the fraction of the same symptoms that were reported in diplomats. So we're looking at two different papers here, one that looked at electrosensitivity, one that looked at diplomats. The electrosensitivity paper came several years before the other one, so it can't have been influenced by the diplomats' experience. And we see they're very close concordance, not just in the nature of the symptoms reported, but in the quantitative profile. 81% headache compared to 81% headache. 81% cognitive problems compared to 81% having cognitive problems. Sleep problems, 86%, 76%. Dizziness, 62, 64. Tinnitus, 57, 63. Irritability, 67, 56. Anxiety, 57, 55. So for every symptom that was elicited in common across the two studies, there's very, very tight concordance. It turns out that there isn't any other known exposure or condition that produces these symptoms in this distribution. Now, many other things that cause symptoms by the same mechanisms that radiation causes problems, oxidative stress, and damage to the energy powerhouses of cells called mitochondria, can produce each of these symptoms, but each has its own distinctive profile. So if radiofrequency radiation makes its way into the brain through the skull, there's no skull barrier at the point of the ear. So auditory symptoms like tinnitus are particularly prominent relative to other such exposures. Also, radiation depresses levels of melatonin, which is important for sleep. And it depresses those not equally in everybody, but in the people in whom it depresses them, you also lose those antioxidant protections of melatonin. So these tend to be the same people who develop symptoms. So sleep problems are particularly prominent with this source of that mechanism, radiation, compared to others of these conditions. So they produce their own distinctive profile. And for example, organophosphate pesticides, fat and cholesterol-lowering drugs that can also produce toxicity through these common mechanisms have prominent muscle symptoms, which radiofrequency radiation does not. So again, the symptoms essentially compel electromagnetic radiation as the cause. Next slide. So in addition to symptoms which are subjective, we can look at signs, which are things that are potentially objectively measurable, although it wasn't in all cases the case that they were objectively measured. And we can see that these are also a fit between diplomats and those with electrosensitivity, those who experience problems with radio frequency and sometimes other forms of radiation. We don't have any study that elicited these signs in a common way for diplomats and for electrosensitive individuals, so we can't compare them quantitatively, but we can see that they are a fit in terms, they're a match in terms of what the signs are: hearing loss, vision problems, speech and balance problems, nosebleed, brain swelling, damage to white matter, the myelin sheaths that allow fidelity and timing of brain cell signaling. In both cases, studies reported that brain imaging looked like traumatic brain injury or TBI, and in both cases it was reported that some had in fact had past head injury, but not all had done so. So the signs are also a fit with radiofrequency radiation. Next slide. There's also precedent for past exposure of U.S. diplomats to microwave radiation in a U.S. embassy setting, specifically at the Moscow embassy from the early 1950s to the latter 1980s or 1990s, depending on the source. And so what was the reason for this radiation? Well, the hypotheses then were really similar to what the hypotheses would be now. One was intentional harm. A second was surveillance. A third, actually put forth by the Russians, they said they weren't trying to surveil us, but were jamming our surveillance device on the roof of our embassy building. But there had to have been at least some surveillance involved, because we know that there were microwave-activated listening devices planted by the Russians, including one in a carving of the Great Seal given to Ambassador Averell Harriman. I understand that that listening device now reposes in the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Shown here is a picture of Ambassador Walter Stossel, who threatened to resign unless the State Department personnel were told that they were being microwaved, and he went on to die of leukemia, a cancer type that has been tied in many studies to radiofrequency radiation. And incidentally, a number of the other personnel there ultimately developed leukemia as well, a small fraction, but still a good number. Next slide. So this evidence, in my view, was completely compelling, indeed conclusive for radiofrequency radiation being the source of the so-called Havana syndrome before there was any evidence that anyone had attempted to measure it or had documented high levels of radiofrequency. But in fact, it came out that one of the affected Foreign Service personnel in Guangzhou, China, where reports came out in April of 2018 that individuals were also affected, had actually secured a so-called commercial off-the-shelf or COTS Trifield 100XE meter, and found that the readings went off the top of the meter, which meant that the measured radiofrequency was in excess of 1 milliwatt per centimeter squared, which makes it exceed safety limits worldwide. In fact, this is 100 times the safety limit for sustained exposure in China. So they photographed the readings, brought in the meter and the readings, which were confiscated, and they were told that these were now classified, but the mom of the individuals was one of those affected and was not sort of subject to these classification requirements, and that's how we know about this now. They were incidentally medevaced out within 24 hours after their health problems had previously been dismissed. Next slide. So what is the force? As we've alluded to in the Moscow setting, leading theories would be surveillance or weaponry. Much less likely are the kinds of commercial communication devices, such as those that affect civilians, although these could be responsible in some of the scattered cases that have been reported around the world since the Havana and Guangzhou, China episodes. So regarding surveillance, there's well-known so-called TTW, or through-the-wall surveillance, which you can read about in reports from the National Institute of Justice or the ACLU. It's in use by police departments and three-letter agencies in the U.S. and around the world. And you can use something called Y-Hear type technology to do auditory surveillance with this. By the way, this can go through any wall material, including concrete, except for metal. And in fact, it might also be surveillance seeking to secure information from people's electronic devices, and there are reasons to think that might perhaps be more likely in this instance. Electronic weapons have been in development for decades. Certainly we have information about this from the Soviet Union, with articles dating back to the latter 1990s, already talking about former microwave weapon systems by the Soviet Union, primarily to take out electronic devices. But microwaves have also been weaponized, including through the so-called active denial system used for crowd control in the U.S., although that uses much higher frequencies that are intended to primarily affect the skin and cause burning, and would not, by the way, cause the fray effect. But they also would be less expected to cause the other symptoms because the high frequency penetrates less deeply. Next slide. So what mechanism could be responsible for the health problems produced by radiofrequency radiation? And the answer is oxidative stress, that kind of free radical injury that antioxidants help to protect against. There is abundant evidence that oxidative stress is caused by radiofrequency radiation, including an article by Yaki Menko and colleagues that found that 100 articles had each examined whether low-intensity radiofrequency radiation caused oxidative stress, and 93 of these 100 studies had found that it did. So there's extensive replication of evidence that oxidative stress is implicated, caused by radiofrequency radiation. And there's masses of evidence that oxidative stress in turn causes a number of downstream mechanisms, damage to the energy powerhouses of cells called mitochondria, damage to membranes, alteration in voltage-gated ion channels that reside in membranes and are important for the health of cells and also for signaling, alterations in blood flow, increases in inflammation, increases in cell death, autoimmune activation. Oxidative stress modifies things in the body in a way that makes them subject to autoimmune attack, and also damage to the so-called blood-brain barrier, or BBB, that helps to protect the brain from intrusion of toxic chemicals. So radiofrequency radiation causes oxidative stress, which causes all of these, and there's also literature directly tying radiofrequency radiation to each of these downstream mechanisms. Each of these, in turn, can contribute to health problems. And in fact, oxidative stress and the closely intertwined phenomenon of mitochondrial injury are known to produce each of the symptoms that are reported in the Diplomats. Next slide. So evidence that radiofrequency radiation can cause toxicity is not new. You may see some reports promoted by injury that only ionizing radiation, which is in the higher frequency end of the range, can cause problems. But again, there's abundant evidence that radiofrequency radiation causes damage not by ionization, but by oxidative stress. And reports of health problems and toxic biological mechanisms with radiofrequency date back on the order of 100 years, including multiple reports by U.S. government agencies. So this is not fringe science. So, for example, 1931 Navy report, these are just a tiny fraction, by the way, of reports. 1972 Navy report by the Defense Intelligence Agency, or DIA, by NASA, and by the Air Force. And the Air Force report cited here, which is entitled Radiofrequency / microwave biological effects, so it's focused on radiofrequency radiation, states, quote, experimental evidence has shown that exposure to low-intensity radiation can have a profound effect on biological processes. So this type of radiation, it was acknowledged, can have a profound effect on biological processes. Next slide. So how does this hypothesis stack up against the other hypotheses that have been put forth to account for so-called Havana syndrome, or as the government is now calling them, anomalous health incidents? So we can look at these key characteristics, specifics of the noises, symptoms, signs, precedent, measurement, and biological mechanisms. And as we saw, each of these are a fit for RF, but none are really a fit for any of the other things. Sonic hypothesis can explain the existence of sounds, but as we saw, the specific characteristics of the sounds are not a fit for sonic sources. They don't produce sound that follows people or is tightly localized in space, or that fails to attenuate when you cover your ears. The mass hysteria hypothesis falls short on many grounds. First off, there actually isn't any meaningful evidence that mass hysteria ever causes chronic health problems. There is no known mechanism that would be responsible for such a thing, much less a test to see if such a mechanism is operating. And the fact that there's a fit in terms of quantitative symptoms across individuals, which fraction of individuals reported this symptom versus that symptom compared to radiofrequency radiation, that could not be produced by social contagion unless people were working closely together for the purpose of intentionally producing those fractions of symptoms. The effects of stress are well known and are not a match to this. The organophosphate hypothesis is perhaps the closest to being compatible, since organophosphate pesticides, which are the favored hypothesis for Canadian diplomats, do also cause these same mechanisms, oxidative stress and mitochondrial impairment, but the symptoms of organophosphate toxicity don't match the profile, again, much more prominent muscle symptoms, much less prominent auditory and sleep problems. And on top of this, this would not account for the noises. And finally, there's the viral hypothesis that also can't account for the noise, nor the quantitative distribution of symptoms. So the RF hypothesis has extensive specificity and triangulation, and it's the only hypothesis that is a fit when you look at specifics to any, much less all of these features. So essentially, in my view at least, the evidence really compels the conclusion that pulse radio frequency / microwave radiation is the cause. And of course, this has implications for the rest of us who are exposed to radio frequency radiation, but that's not the subject of this talk. Next slide. And I'd like to thank you all for your kind attention. And I'd be delighted to take any questions.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to so many questions. I hope there was a point there where I lost some audio. I hope that wasn't the same for everybody, but we'll have to catch up there later. We lost a little bit there, but amazing. And looking forward to talking to you later. But moving right along here, we are going to return to the amazing Mr. Paul Svensson, who is going to sing the song Every Breath You Take by Sting. And he'll tell you a little bit about that. Paul?
Yeah, this seemed like an appropriate thing to sing after that talk. So here we go. And I'm not performing it. We're all singing it together. Here we go. Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you every single day. Every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see? You belong to me. My poor heart breaks every step you take, every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Now we're gonna skip this whole middle thing because it's unsingable, and we're just gonna skip it, and we're gonna go right to every move you make following all of that, right? Got it? Nod your head. Here we go. Every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you take, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Chorus. Oh, can't you see? You belong to me. My poor heart breaks with every step you take, every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Every move you make, every step you take, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you. Creepy, huh? Every breath you take, every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, every breath you take, every move you make, every game you play. So to be watching you every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay. I'll be watching you. Just sing that. I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you. Once again, good singing.
Thank you, Paul. I have this idea of this poor person just, constantly going, somebody over the shoulder all the time. We have a personal moment today. This is just a chance for somebody of our community here to share a little bit about their life or what's been going on. And today's personal moment is going to come from Kristen Smith. Kristen?
It is an anonymous submission from one of our assemblers, actually two today, and this is all along that same theme that we had last month about inspiration. And so I've got two that I'll be reading now. And also I'd like to take this opportunity, as we do every month, if you have any personal moments that you would like to share, please let us know, because I think people really like hearing these, but it's a little bit of a struggle getting them from you. So I encourage you to, it could just be like a paragraph of something cool that happened with you in your life, and we would love to share them. So one today is being inspired, and one is inspiring others. So here's our first one. All right, this story is about a friend's dad, Mr. Williams, older guy, married his secretary back in the Mad Men days, that type. Anyway, he got cancer. One of his daughters moved up her wedding by several months, just in case he didn't make it long enough to walk her down the aisle. Scary stuff. But he survived. He beat it, as they say. Well, he'd be the first to correct you if you phrased it like that. He'd say, no, it beat me, and I just barely got lucky. He saw a young woman die of the same cancer, and the language of fighting and losing the battle made him crazy. We were all just sitting there hoping for the best and suffering through the worst, he told us. Dying wasn't failing. It wasn't because you didn't try hard enough to live. It just happened. He was always a bit gruff, but something about this experience softened him. The way he looked at his wife, his girls, the way he'd hand you a cup of coffee if you were in his living room, the way he started laughing with his belly and crying silently without feeling the need to quickly wipe away the tears out of some sort of manly shame. He started listening more, asking questions rather than telling stories, and soaking up the people around him. Cancer didn't give him these things. It just tried to take them away too soon. It came back, the cancer. He didn't make it. A while after that, my mom died. I remember shortly after she was gone, finding myself in Mr. Williams' back porch, sitting there with his family, who missed him, who understood loss, who felt safe for me to sit in the thick of this grief with. We would talk and laugh, and then all go silent together. During one of these stretches of silence, one of his daughters said, "There's Venus, see?" And we all looked up together. Whew. And now another personal moment, an inspiring moment from another anonymous and different assembler. I remember once being at a theme park. In the games area, I went to the place where you shoot basketballs. There were a lot of people hanging around watching the men who were shooting. It was very cool to see the looks of astonishment on the faces of the kids in the crowd. when I made 3 shots and walked away with a large stuffed animal. They couldn't believe a girl could do that. I like to think that maybe a few of the young girls were inspired that day to believe they too could win at things they thought only guys could do. And that young boys there realized that girls can do cool things too. And so those are our personal moments for today. Thank you.
Well read, Kristen. And the first story just always sort of reminds me of how wonderful it is to realize what you have while you have it. Without waiting for those moments, because in many ways, whatever we're going through, we're all very lucky to have each other and a community that we belong to, and this wonderful life that we're experiencing, which is both horrible and wonderful at the same time. Today's March 20th, just 4 days ago, on March 16th, it marked the 2-year anniversary of the mask mandate in California. That is for people like me that are essential workers. That means that every 5 days a week, I'm wearing a mask 8 to 12 hours a day, at least for the last 2 years. My pandemic experience has been different than most because I was out working the entire time. And this 2 years of the mask wearing, it also encapsulates the time in which each of us have had our own COVID challenges and obstacles. And I'm going to tell you about mine, but I'll be using a lot of I statements today. But I have to tell you that a lot of those things that I know that people have been through have been a lot more dire than anything that I'm about to tell you. But the things that affect you seem to be more important to you than the things that are affecting other people. So I'm going to share my story. Our theme for today is exposed. So for today's MC address, I'm going to expose myself. It'll be fine. I started working for Costco, Price Club, 1983. I worked as a cashier's assistant. Now that's a job that you have where you box groceries, fold clothes, push carts, clean up at the end of the night. It's the entry-level job at Costco. And I loved it because I got to help people, and I love helping people. And all day long, I was helping people. And I did a really good job at boxing things, and they made me a supervisor. And I did that job for a long time and probably would have still kept doing it because you have autonomy and you're helping people. But now you're not just helping the employees, you're helping the members also. And I did that job for a long time. In 1996, though, this person was born and we named him Lowell. And my priorities changed quite a bit. My warehouse manager, who had been asking me to be a manager for a long time, finally came to me and said, "Are you doing the best you can for that boy?" And I had to say no. So he made me a manager. And it turned out I never wanted to be a manager because I never wanted to live the work that I do, but I actually liked it because I got to help even more people. And now I had a department that I was in charge of with a bottom line profit, and it was very exciting. And I did a really good job at that. I did different jobs for a few years and learned more about the warehouse, and they promoted me to senior manager. So now I'm managing managers and I'm responsible for the whole warehouse and all the people in it. And it turns out I really like it because I like helping people, and I just had a good time at it. And they promoted me to operations auditor, and they taught me for 6 weeks all the procedures for the company, and they sent me out across the United States, and I went over to a bunch of Costco's and I saw how they operated and made my assessment and reported back to the company. And then they thought I did a good job at that, so they made me assistant general manager. That's the prime job at the warehouse. The GM, of course, is the prime job, but the GM really is responsible for everything, but it's really the assistants that do the work. And there's 2 or 3 assistants in every building. So I'm responsible now for $19 million worth of inventory, 430 employees, and all the members, everybody, everything that's there, the facility, all the stuff that's happening. It's a lot of stress and pressure. But I was good at it. And every day I'm in my pressed slacks and my shirt that I had pressed the night before, long sleeve button down shirt. I've got my, number 2 on the side, number 3 on the top, haircut, business in the front, business in the back. And I'm ready to go. I'm standing there with my phone in my left pocket and my keys in my right pocket and my cutter in my right pocket and my hairnet in my right pocket and my radio is clipped to the back of my belt with my wire running up from my earpiece right in my ear, clipped onto my my collared shirt. That's my procedure. And there I stood, the boss. And I didn't even have to tell people to do anything. I asked, why would you mind doing this? And they would do it, of course, because I'm the boss. And when I said something at the warehouse, if I made a decision on something, that was the final word. That was it. I always try to help the members, but if I can't, I said, I'm sorry, we can't do that. It's against the law or whatever it is. And that was it. But when the masks came, things started changing for me. And I was already struggling a little bit because 6 months earlier, I had started on my medical gender transition. That's HRT. That means hormone replacement therapy, which means I was taking testosterone blockers to block that hormone. And I was taking patches with a new bioidentical to estrogen hormone. And over that past 6 months, I started growing my hair out a little bit. So I didn't quite look the same professional, bit looked a little shaggy. And my face started changing a little bit. And then the masks came. And I was already struggling a little bit because my drive had changed a little bit. My certainty had faded a little bit. But when the masks came, my tools were taken away. My stock in trade is making a communication with people and letting them know that I'm listening empathetically and that I do care about them because I care about people. I do. And without my face being covered, people misunderstood some of the things I said, or they didn't know what I was looking at. I was looking at them intensely. They can't see the rest of my face, so they don't know if I'm thinking what they're saying is crazy. And people started questioning, what I was looking or what I was thinking. And also, you can't hear very well with the masks. And if you know me, you know that my default mechanism for taking, pretty much all of life, but stressful situations is humor. I've always mitigated things with humor. And that's gone because now I can't tell jokes because people are misunderstanding. And a lot of my jokes are ironic and subtle, and that was gone. So I started getting very anxious. And not only that, with the protocols that we were changing every day, Costco took everything very seriously. And I did too. And everybody in that building was my responsibility. And COVID early, as you remember, we just didn't know what would happen. And overall, the thing that was just driving me crazy, the thing that was making me so anxious and nervous was I was afraid that I might catch COVID from one of the 30 to 75,000 people that were in there during the week, and that I would bring it home to my wife, who has lung issues, and that she would end up the last part of her life in the hospital, not being able to breathe, and I wouldn't be able to see her. And that overall thought every day, all the time, it just drove me down. And the things that we were doing, measuring people coming in, it was just also draconian. And I lost my sense of humor, and I just became super anxious. I had my first panic attack. I've never had that before. I started taking antidepressant medication, something that I've always been proud that I never had done because everyone in my family does that, and I never have needed to. So I started taking that, and still was struggling. I had planned on taking my gender time. Now, I've been transgendered all my life. And my very first memory as a child was being on the porch in my home in Chula Vista. And my mother had just polished our fingernails, my sisters and I. And we ran down to the high school, the elementary school carnival, which is just down the street. And we showed off our fingernails. And I remember there was a man that was really nice. He said how pretty they looked. And I felt so happy. And I remember coming home that night, and the nail polish came off of my fingers, but they stayed on my sister's until I remember weeks later, they were just little specks of paint on her fingers. And it's through these incidences, young me learned that I was different and that I had to keep things a secret and that I needed to learn to be a boy. So I went to boys' school, that's what I say. And I learned how to do all the things that I was supposed to do. I was the oldest of 4 children and ended up watching my children a lot, had a lot of responsibilities and started working at an early age. And I always had the secret. I had the secret that I couldn't tell anybody about. And as I read more about it, at the time I read about it, I was a transvestite. That's what I called, which is a super derogatory term now, but at the time that's what I was. But at the time, it was considered to be a deviant characteristic. And so I knew that I was deviant and that I had a secret and that I was different and that I couldn't tell anybody and that I had to act the way that I had to act. And I did this my whole life. So here I am at gender transition. I took a little bit of time off and I'm so happy about it. And it was just wonderful to not be at work and to be away from the stress. And on my 60th birthday, I started living as myself. I'm 2.5 years into my gender transition right now. It's a bit about midway. And I'm just at home. I had all the support and everything's been super great. And everybody around me has been terrific. But at work, I was just on tenterhooks every day. I went back to work as Michelle Soden, and now me, the sharp, clean-cut white male was wearing female clothes with a badge that said Michelle. And for the half of you that don't know about this, women's clothes don't have any pockets. And I had to figure out where to put all my stuff. I didn't know where to carry my keys. I didn't have a place to put my radio. I wasn't wearing a belt anymore. I was wearing earrings, but I also had a hairnet. So I pulled off my hairnet and I'd lose an earring. So I lost about 6 pairs of half pairs of earrings. I've lost 5 pairs of prescription glasses because with this big nose, I've never been able to figure out how not to make my glasses fog up. And each time that I lost something, I lost a little bit of confidence too. And I lost a little bit of my belief in my ability to do things. And for the first time in my career of the 10 years that I've been doing this job as assistant general manager, I've been moved into more important warehouses. I was at Mission Valley, where there was the busiest warehouse in the district, and then they moved me to Morena Boulevard, which is right next to the regional offices. Next stop, general manager. I really felt like I was on my way to go there, but I just struggled. I started struggling. I was anxious all the time. I had my first panic attack. They dealt me out. They moved me out. Nobody talked to me or said anything, but I knew I wasn't doing my job as best I could. And I was just so anxious. And I got moved to a warehouse that was basically the warehouse where people go to retire, which of course is 2 miles from my house. So I'm really happy about that. But I thought, new start, took a little bit of time off. And I went back at it. Nobody knows me there before. And I struggled still. I just couldn't get going. I called it I know a lot of us struggled during COVID. I called it languishing. A lot of things that I just felt like it just couldn't get started. And I started doing my projects were coming up against deadlines and I started missing deadlines. And then I started dealing with people that weren't wearing masks. And I had all these emotions that were coming and I was so mad all the time at these people, not for not wearing a mask, but that just the idea that somebody would make a decision to care so little about other people, it just made me angry. And I had to take some time off. I just had to reset. And I took intensive therapy. I got some medication that I could take on a daily basis. I upped my antidepressant dosage. I went to hypnosis and I got myself to a place where I felt like I knew who I was ready to go, and I went back to work and I did a great job. And I really hunkered down and I did all the things that you have to do to be an assistant general manager, which is you basically have to live the job. You have to think, you have to prepare before you come in, you do the job all day, you handle whatever comes, you leave when you're done, and then you think about the next day all the rest of the time, and they can call you any time of night and you can walk into the warehouse. And that's what I did for a period of about 3 months. And I could see that I could do it. And it was so hard so hard to be able to do that. And one Thursday morning, I woke up and I said, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do it. It's just, I can do it. I can see I can do it, but it's costing me so much and there's no money that's worth it. It just isn't. And so I took the weekend off. I talked with my spouse and we met with our financial people and I made a decision to step down. It's a very unusual thing. Managers do step out, but somebody at my level, it's unusual for that to happen. Financially, we're okay, but I didn't want to have any responsibilities. So I am now a cashier's assistant at the warehouse that I got moved to. That's the lowest job. So I'm boxing groceries and folding clothes and helping people. And just the funny thing is that the warehouse that I work at, the fence that is the back fence shares with the school that I went to, a Harborside Elementary School, for the first time, where I wore my fingernails to the fair. And it just all seems so fitting. And I will tell you, I am still struggling a little bit. I'm still having a hard time figuring out who it is I am and need to be. The things that I've realized, though, are that what I had tried to do was step into a role of a person that I am at my heart, but I had created this role of Stephen Soden, and it was what everybody saw, but it wasn't always me. And now I realize that Gracie Michelle Soden, I'm starting from the bottom, and it seems apt because it's a chance for me to figure out what I need to do and who I am, all from the same sort of place. And I'm actually finding that to be very, very difficult as far as my pride goes sometimes, particularly knowing that I got sent out of a warehouse, but I am just so happy. And the one thing that I learned out of my life of growing up and keeping secrets is that I never made assumptions about anybody. I never have made assumptions about people. When I meet them, I don't assume that the person I'm seeing is everything they have going on. Each of us have stories. Each of us has things going on. Each of us has struggles, and each of us has obstacles. And we all put on a face that we can meet each other with. And it wasn't until I was honest about who I was that I met the love of my life. It wasn't until I was honest about who I was that I met the friends that I have now, and I'm part of the community that I have. And I want each of us just to take the time to know that we can meet anybody on a bad day and have an opinion about them, but it's not the whole person. We're seeing the face that people put on, the face that we put on to get through this life. And whatever it takes to get you through this life, I'm for it. And if that means it's a belief in something else, that's okay, as long as it's not hurting other people. I want to thank you all for having me be part of your community and for letting me share my story. I know that it's been a difficult time for each of us, and I just hope and feel that right now we're at the point where things are going to get better. And to that end, I want you to know that I'll be doing the announcement shortly, but I'm letting you know that next April we can all be together at the assembly, and that's what I'm looking forward to. Thank you. As usual, we'll take a minute for silent reflection. Well, just some announcements. I'm going to read right through them quickly. First of all, let me do this because we did have a couple of more life happens that came in. One of them was, let's see where we are here. Oh dear. I know we have a new person who is attending with us, Tanya. I believe is how you say that. And want to welcome you. I can see right there. And thanks so much for being with us today. And And Roland wanted to let us know. I'm sorry, I seem to have lost that note. Roland has a bunch of things going on that he wanted to let us know about. So Roland, whatever you got going on, we're with you, and we're happy to see you today with us. Announcements. Taco Tuesday, TALK-O Tuesday, is on Zoom at 6 p.m. just to chat and check in with people. It's fun. We've been having quite a good turnout lately, and the conversation's been great, and it's really neat. And just come and let us know what's going on. It's on Zoom, and it is terrific. Scattergories is the second and fourth Thursday of each month at 7 p.m. I now, with my new schedule, I'm able to play Scattergories every Thursday, and I love it. You should come. You just need a pencil, a piece of paper. You could even have a pen and write on your wall, or a crayon. I don't care, but it's really fun. And then join us for a brisk urban walk, the 7 bridges around Balboa Park and North Park on April 2nd at 3 p.m. This is always a popular walk, and plenty of people want to do it. I'm calling this a brisk walk because some of the walks we have are for everybody, and we have people that walk at different speeds, and we always wait for people. And then we wait a little bit so they can rest up too. But this walk, we're just going to walk straight through, and it's quite a long walk, and it's quite neat. And there's more than 7 bridges. It's going to be exciting. So please come walk that with us. We have some save the dates for things that aren't on our meetup yet. April 23rd, we are the site hosts for the Choyas Creek statewide creek to bay cleanup, which Jen talked to us about later. We'd love people to volunteer and to clean up. On April 30th, we have our urban walk from Imperial Beach to Painted Rocks and back with Bonus Slutch at the Tin Fish at the end of the Abbey Pier. I'll be hosting that one. And we did this walk before. It's really cool. And we're going to go see the Painted Rocks that are still there, the Rock Snake in IB. Super cool. It's been there going for 2 years, and it was put there for a feel-good thing during COVID. COVID, by the way, Corona, C-O, virus, V-I, disease, D, 2019, COVID-19, now you know, which you probably already did. On May 7th, Tulips will have our next rummage sale fundraiser, so we love your donations. This time we're looking for, to make it a more streamlined yard sale with fewer tchotchkes and clothing and more larger items. So please take a look around and see what you have that you just can't bear to part with, but you will because you know somebody else can use it. Money, we're going to talk about that today. Now, we did lose a small number of recurrent donors during the pandemic, and while we didn't spend much money on our usual venue, we did donate funds to places we need, in need, and we hosted a solstice party, which many of you attended. And at the bottom of the program are some QR codes or links to where you can donate, and every penny counts. Monthly recurring donations make budgeting and planning possible. So if you can do it, Sunday Assembly adds to your life, and please consider doing it. We are all volunteers and depend on your donations to keep this thing going. And thank you to each of you who has kept this going. We are solvent, and we are able to do things, and we have a bunch of whole nice things planned that we can have together for fun. But I don't think this really is important right now. The thing that's important is that we meet again with Mr. Paul Svensson, who will be singing For What It's Worth by Stephen Stills. Paul?
Okay. This was a song that was actually never written as a war protest song, but it quickly got picked up. So, in solidarity with the folks in Ukraine, there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I've got to beware. Stop, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds, getting so much resistance from behind, and the time has come. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. There's 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs. Mostly say hooray for our side. Think it's time we stop. Oh, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep into your life, it will creep. Starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, man comes and takes you away, and we will stop. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going on. Stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going. You better stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop now. Everybody look what's going down. Oh, everybody look what's going down. Sing that with me. Everybody look what's going down. Everybody look what's going down. Think it's time we stop. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Thank you, Paul. There was some of you were jamming in there. That was fun to watch. Sorry, that was really neat. I was watching you, every little move you take, every little breath you take.
Oh no.
Okay, creepy. Next assembly in April will be in person at our venue and hopefully streaming for those of you who are out of town and not ready for in-person events yet. Super excited about that. Please do come. With Dr. Horvath, a clinical psychologist specializing in addictive problems. He'll tell us what the addiction treatment industry gets wrong and you can get right. And that's it for today. But please stay after to ask the speaker your burning questions and have lunch with us at the big room on the bottom floor of Boomerangs in Kearney Mesa. I think Claremont or Kearney Mesa in a few minutes. I'm going to turn this over. I'll take a few for some of us to get there. Sorry. So the rest of this probably doesn't make sense, but it'll take a little while for people to get there. I'm going to ride my bike up there. So I'm going to go change my clothes and I'll meet you up at Boomerangs for lunch. Please do come. We had a bunch of people last time and gosh, it's so much fun to actually see people in person, and love you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful Sunday and a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you in April in the Assembly, 3030 Front Street, right here in San Diego, California. Bye.